Hey everyone, we are jumping into something different. I'm going to be playing some Arkham Horror, the card game on Tabletop Sim. This is a physical game with physical cards, and you should buy them. But for the purposes of sharing it with you all, I'm going to be using Tabletop Sim because that works for me. Sorry. Anyway, this is a game that I have been playing a bunch of over the years. My girlfriend got me into it in the first place. She's lovely. And it is a cooperative card game that you play against a series of missions that are, authored, right? Which is really cool. It's not just like playing against something random. Although, I would be interested to see that kind of mode if that existed. Anyway, what we're doing here is I've never played it solo. So it's a cooperative game, so it can go all the way down to one player if you want to do that. And I've never done that before. I've only ever played with my girlfriend. And I wanted to... We're actually starting a new game for ourselves. And we were brainstorming characters and decks, because your deck is based around a character that you're playing in the world of Arkham Horror. And I was like, hey, here's a thought. How about basically I built my character and I'm gonna play it with her and it's gonna be great. But I've got a pet favorite character in the game. So I built a deck around her too, and I'm like, I'm not gonna make you play with Lola again. I'm not gonna do that to you. But I still kind of want to try this deck. So, in fact, actually, I need to change the stream title. Give me a second. Did I spell Arkham right? Well, that doesn't look right. Ah, because I spelled Akram. That's why it looks wrong. Alright. So we're going to be playing my homebrew deck called Garbage Queen of Arkham. Which is both actual reference to the mechanics I'm going to be engaging in. And also, everyone thinks that this character is really bad. So I'm going to be playing Lola Hayes. She is the actress. Her whole shtick as an investigator, that's what the characters are called, is that she has the benefit of being able to swap roles. If you're thinking of a game like Hearthstone or Magic, there's the different roles, which are like the different colors or the different classes in those games. Now, they're actually called classes in this, I believe, but I'm calling them roles because that is what she calls them. On her player card, which I'll pull up in a second, it says choose a role at the beginning of the game. We're going to summon it here. We're going to say it's not published, it's a private deck, and go. Great. So this is my deck. It is 55 cards. Normally your decks are 30 cards plus a couple extra. For this, I have taken the permanent feature Forced Learning, which increases your deck size by 15. It is one of the new Edge of the Earth, I believe it's from Edge of the Earth, level 0 permanent cards. Permanent cards are cards that don't exist in your deck. They just kind of hang out. They don't contribute to your deck size, and they just give you a passive bonus. Usually, they are things that you have to buy with experience. You gain experience across missions, and you can make your deck better. These ones basically all have an upside and a downside, and therefore, they can put them in your deck for 0 experience because you're still kind of at a net even. This one is your deck is bigger, so it's harder to find the cards you want, but every upkeep, which is the sort of the draw phase of the game, You don't draw a card. You instead look at 2 cards and discard one of them. Keep the other. Now, I may be making some assumptions about rules interactions. Rules are a bit wonky sometimes in this game. So that's a thing. Yeah, that's just how it is. I'm also going to... so if I make a ruling that is incorrect, that's, that's going to happen. That's fine. One other card to look at is Shrewd Analysis. This card I am not actually using, but it is also a level 0 card that's permanent, and from a deck building perspective, it is still it's not affecting my deck, but it does help me meet Lola's restriction, which I'll look at in a second. It's not necessary, but it's like also literally no reason to not use. Generally, it's so not useful that you might as well not use it in most decks, but in Lola, I say you might as well not use it. That was terribly worded. The other one I'm using is another level 0 talent from, it is a talent, but level 0 permanent card from Edge of the Earth, which is the most recent campaign at the time of this recording, although a new one is coming out relatively soon, I believe. This one says, at the beginning of the game, discard the top 10 cards of your deck. So, this one doesn't really have a downside other than your deck is going to go through faster, and if you run out of your deck, you take damage and then reshuffle. So that's possibly a bad thing. Of course, not such a big deal when I've got 55 cards in my deck, so that's probably not going to be a big deal. The reason that the upside of this card is that a lot of cards care about pulling stuff out of your discard pile. It's not a super common mechanic. It's almost only seen in the red cards, the survivor cards. But the really idea of this deck is to take advantage of that discard synergy, because also forced learning is going to be forcing things into my discard. So I'm really trying to do as much stuff with my discard as possible with this deck. That is the goal. So let's look at Lola herself. She is a performer. She is the actress. And after you draw your opening hand, you choose a role, which is, those symbols are the wow, I just blanked. They're the classes. They are Guardian. What the heck? I thought that first one was Guardian. Is it Survivor? It's Survivor. They are Survivor, Guardian, Seeker, Rogue, Mystic, or Neutral. And Neutral is not really a class. Neutral cards can go into any deck, so it's kind of irrelevant. I don't know if we've ever seen a investigator that doesn't have access to neutrals. That'd be kind of cool if they could only have like level 0 neutrals. I bet that exists. That feels like something that either doesn't exist or could. Here we can see the deck building. She's got a 35 card deck size, not including the additional cards. You can see later it says additional deck building requirements do not count towards deck size. 2 copies of Improvisation, which is her signature card, 2 copies of Crisis Identity, which is her signature weakness, and a basic random weakness, which was randomized for me by the Tabletop Sim mod, but I have not looked at yet. I'll do that in a moment. What is important about this is that you can see it's level 0 to 3, level 0 to 5. As you get experience in the game, you're able to upgrade your deck from mission to mission. Right now, everything is level 0, so it's not a big deal. But one of the big downsides of Lola is that she can take any cards, any class cards, which is her upside, but she can't go any higher than level 3. So she can't get the really sweet stuff, which is a big deal. Continuing her ability, it says you can only play, commit, or trigger abilities on neutral cards or cards of your role. As a quick action, that's the Lightning Bolt. You can switch your role, but you can only do this once per round. So I can swap between roles to use my different cards, which makes her actually really limiting, because most classes, most investigators can do 2 roles pretty okay. She can do all 5 roles, but only 1 at a time. If she could do 2 roles at a time, she'd probably be pretty strong. But being able to do 1 roll at a time is very limiting. So that's why she's kind of the garbage queen. But I love her. She's great. So let's first take a look at what we got. That's not my weakness. What's my weakness? Where's my random weakness? I want my random... There it is. I have a leg injury. Put leg injury into play in your threat area if I ever draw this. Leg injury can be healed as over a single point of damage on you. Cool. If you heal it, you discard it. And after you take a move, resign, or evade action, you cannot take any of those types of actions for the remainder of the turn. Which I originally read this as like, if you take a move action, you can't take another move action. But it actually is, if you take a move action, you cannot take a move, a resign, or an evade action. So that's pretty limiting. Those are basic actions. Something I really like with this game is that you have a series of basic actions that you can access, instead of everything requiring a card played from your hand. Even though most things will be coming from your hand. Now, over here, we can see all the different scenarios that are officially published. There's also a series of like fan-made scenarios, which we will not be looking at. But official scenarios. I was recommended by my girlfriend to use Path of Carcosa. I think Lola came out in the set before it maybe, but this one's actually kind of about her. So let's take a look at this. Click download, click place, and that should automatically populate somewhere. Here it is. Ooh, one of my favorite parts of this game is getting to read all the cool flippin' dialogue. By dialogue, I mean text, I guess. Lola enrolls. It's explanation. Woo! Maybe she was originally released in this set. That makes sense. I've heard that most people are released the set prior to the one they're relevant to. I don't know why that is, but I've heard that's true. Anyway. He mentioned the establishments of the dynasty in Carcosa, the lakes which connected Hastur, Aldebaran, and the mystery of the Hydes. He spoke of Casilda and Camilla, and sounded the cloudy depths of Dem and the lake of Hali. I'm probably pronouncing a lot of those words wrong. Robert W. Chambers, the repairer of reputations. The Path of Carcosa is a campaign for Arkham Horror, the card game for 1 to 4 players. Curtain Call and The Last King can be found in the Path to Carcosa Deluxe expansion. Echoes of the Past, Unspeakable Oath, and A Phantom of Truth, The Pallid Mask, Black Star Rises, and Dim Carcosa can be found in the 6 Mythos packs of the same titles within the Path to Carcosa cycle. Additional rules, there is a word hidden. Basically, any rules we'll go over as we get to them. Let's not worry about that so much. Some story resolution interludes will have you mark doubt or conviction. Cool. Anything interesting about Lola that I don't know? As a renowned actress, Lola Hayes can play many different roles. At the beginning of each scenario, after investigators draw opening hands, Lola Hayes must choose a role: neutral, guardian, seeker, rogue, mystic, or survivor. Lola can only play cards, commit cards to skill tests, or trigger abilities on neutral cards or cards whose class matches her role. This restriction only applies to player cards, not to encounter cards or weaknesses. Note that constant and forced abilities remain active on cards whose class does not match Lola's role. And that is usually the thing you take advantage of when you're playing Lola. So, I've never set up one of these before, because my girlfriend always does it. Story cards. Story cards are a new card type. Path of Carcosa campaign. They tell you things. They're a new card type? Really? Alright, campaign setup. I will be playing on standard, so let's go through this. Choose investigators. We did it. Each player assembles their deck. I did it. Choose difficulty level. I'll be playing on standard. Easy. I want to watch the play. Standard. I want to read the signs. Hard. I want to speak the oath. Expert. I want the king in yellow. You're now ready to begin in the prologue. Ooh. Alright, cool. So that's fun. Let's read some text. Oh, actually, let's actually do that thing that they said to do. So I think if I click somewhere... Oh, maybe I need to open the box first. Yes, these are all these different ones. We want Curtain Call. Setup or place? Oh! What? Reset, set new, submit, remove, cancel, add. Set new. Setting new position relative items in memory. Okay, I'm gonna hit place, I guess. Okay, that worked. Great. And we will make sure that we click on standard. which will reset this bag to 15 tokens. That's a bag. Which are these ones. There should be 15. I'm just going to assume that's correct. And for anyone who is confused, though I imagine most people watching this will have, know the game. But for those who don't, instead of dice, we've got a series of tokens in a bag. The tokens have symbols on them. Most of them are just numbers with a positive or a negative modifier. And by most, I mean most of them have a negative modifier. And that will subtract from your stats when you try and do something. And you have to have a big enough number to do the thing. It's pretty good. On the other hand, we've got these other symbols like the skull and the wibbly whoop and the zippity zap. These are, well, the zippity zap is the elder sign, which means something that your card says that you do happens. Usually this means you win, but sometimes you'll also get some other benefits. The wibbly woo, on the other hand, is, I think it has an official name, but people just call it the auto fail. You fail no matter what. You fail. You fail, you fail. You fail, you fail. And nothing you can do about it. You just fail. The skulls are skulls. And the reason that these are important is because, again, we got this cool card here. This is a little not cheat sheet. This is a card that tells you what each symbol means. And this is not just something that you have to memorize. This is something that is unique per mission or scenario or whatever you want to call it. And that is really, really useful because it allows things to be variable without printing different tokens. It's very cool. Anyway, in this case, it's -1, but -3 if you have 3 or more horror. Horror is one of your 2 health bars. You've got physical health and you've got mental health. Horror is bad for your mental health, it turns out. With that out of the way, you turn over the folded program in your hand, reading it for what seems like the 100th time. Miskatonic Playhouse presents The King in Yellow, it reads. A special one-night engagement at Arkham's very own Ward Theatre. An irresistible drama in 2 acts. Production staged and directed by Nigel Ingram. The cast is a small ensemble, with 1 unattributed credit at the end. The Stranger. To have such a highly anticipated play come to Arkham all the way from Paris is a noteworthy event, even if it is just for one night. For weeks leading up to the show, it was the talk of the town. It seemed so unassuming, and yet you have evidence something sinister is at work. It started with the disappearance of one of the stagehands at the theater, a boy only 17, who missed rehearsal one night and was never seen again. Then, less than 2 weeks before the performance, there was the musician, whose corpse was found with a gun in his mouth. Perhaps most chilling was the crazed man the coppers had picked up in Independence Square, who had been ranting and raving about the King's return. He was brought to Arkham Asylum, and you were surprised to discover that he was not alone in his delusions. Finding these events suspicious, you and your companions, assuming I brought any friends, have delved deeper into the matter. Although no connection can be proven, these weren't the only strange events surrounding the up-and-coming play. Instances of suicide and madness have followed in its wake, and you are determined to discover why. The lights in the auditorium dim, and a spotlight shines on the stage. What unfolds is not quite what you expected. Slow-paced and monotonous, the first act of The King in Yellow is a tedious bore. The setting and characters are compelling, but the meandering and nonsensical story does little to entertain or inform. You begin to wonder whether the dreadful events surrounding The King in Yellow aren't connected after all. Perhaps it was just your overactive imagination. How could such a trivial and unassuming show cause such pandemonium? You are surprised when the first act closes without any rising action or revelation. The lights rise for the intermission, and you consider leaving early, stifling a yawn. Before you are able to decide, however, you find yourself drifting to sleep. If Lola Hayes was chosen as an investigator for this campaign, that investigator, which is me, reads Lola prologue out loud. I wonder if I could have just skipped this first prologue and things would have still made sense. Lola prologue. Act 1 came and went without a hitch, as it often did in rehearsal. You couldn't help but note the blank, dismissive expressions on many of the audience members' faces, and you wonder how the audience will react to the play's disturbing second half. The role of Casilda is tiresomely boring for the first half of the play, although you enjoy portraying her regal charm. You find yourself missing your previous co-star, Miriam Twain, and suddenly the dread and regret you had felt in Paris comes flooding back. With a sigh, you retreat to a dark corner backstage to escape the sound of stagehands, preparing for the next scene. You try to quell your emotions and replace your thoughts with those of Casilda's, her hopes, her fears, her fate. Just then, you catch the stranger staring at you from afar, and you find yourself shaking at the mere sight of him. Even though they continue to replace the actor who plays the stranger before each show, and indeed many times during rehearsal, you know that this last-minute replacement is the most horrid of them all. Realizing you never caught his name, a shiver of terror courses through your spine. Have you found your way back to the wolves, like a lost lamb? You cannot look away. His gaze is inescapable. Everything goes black. Proceed to curtain call. You awaken with a start, and as though shaken by an unseen force. You must have slept for quite some time, and there are only a few other patrons in the audience, and no performers on stage. The lights are dimmed, and the stage curtains are tattered and ripped, though you do not remember that being the case during the first act. You wait a moment before you are sure this isn't part of the performance. As you wait, a foul but unrecognizable smell permeates the air. How long have you been asleep? Shaking off your drowsiness, you walk towards one of the seated patrons and ask for the time, but he does not respond. It is then that you realize you are speaking to a corpse. So, we've got to gather the cards that have these symbols. I think that's been done for us right here. Set the following cards aside out of play. That's happened, I believe, over here in this box. And put the theater, lobby, balcony, and backstage locations into play. Each investigator begins at the theater, but if Lola Hayes was chosen as an investigator for this campaign, she begins play at backstage instead. Shuffle the remainder of the encounter cards to build the encounter deck. So, obviously the narrative there assumes that somebody is not playing Lola, even though it is a 1 to 4 player game. But we're going to start, where is it? Backstage. Whoop. So this little card represents where we are in the world. The set is different from what you remember of the play's first act, decorated with a backdrop of an unsettling sunset. Great. The mod will automatically spawn these little clue tokens, depending on the number here. It says 1 clue, so it spawns 1 clue. Speaking of which, this should actually say 1 player. It defaults to 2, apparently. Interesting. Shuffle the remainder of the encounter cards to build the encounter deck. That's this. And do not read this. Great. So we have 2 important parts of the deck. I'm going to need to cough. I apologize. The agenda and the act. You can see this is 2 cards and this is 5 cards. And that sort of gives you an idea about how much time you have left to finish what you need to do. So, the theater is eerily silent. The old wooden floor creaks beneath your feet, and a light rain gently patters on the roof as you explore the auditorium. There are more rotting corpses among the seats, and the rest of the crowd has vanished. This number in the bottom here, the 6, is how many times I can click this button. Technically, you'd be putting little doom tokens on the card in real life, but we can just use numbers because we have technology on our side. If every round you increase this by 1, if it hits 6, you look at the backside of this card and see what happens. Awakening. You pinch yourself to see if you are dreaming, and sure enough, your skin stings and reddens. You take a few deep breaths and try to think rationally. Whatever is going on, you must explore the theater to learn the truth of the matter. This says 3, and then it's got this little like person in a trench coat and hat symbol. That is 3 times the number of investigators. So it's only 3. That is the number of clues we need to gather, which each location in the game has somewhere between 0 and more than 0 clues. I guess not between, somewhere between 0 and infinite clues, which are the number there. Usually that number will also scale with investigators, just not in this case. The other number, the one in the black circle with the white letter? Font? Sure. Is the shroud. It's the difficulty to find said clues. Forced. When backstage is revealed, put 2 of the set-aside backstage doorway locations into play at random. While you are at backstage, each hidden treachery in your hand counts as 3 cards instead of 1 for the purpose of counting your hand size. Cool. Hand side counting is relevant in that, you can only have, you have to discard down to hand size at the end of the thing. We don't need to look at that. We don't need to look at that. Lobby doorway. These are locations. Backstage doorway. Here we are. Okay. So put these back in the box. Don't know what those are. But we'll leave these locations out so that we can access them. So what does it say? It would like to look at backstage. Backstage doorway locations. 2 of them get put into play at random. There are 3, so we don't know which 2 we're getting if we play this multiple times. I do believe I actually have played this mission at least once, but I do not recall in what manner. So we can see symbols in these cards. That little red moon symbol at the top and the little green diamond at the bottom. Basically, the top is where it is and the bottom is where it connects to. So this one, backstage, has a green diamond and it connects to the red moon. This is a red moon, connects to the green diamond. Likewise, this is a red moon and green diamond. And this one, of course, is the yellow circle that it says it connects to. All right, enough of the rules. Let's jump into the game. We're going to draw some cards. I like to make these a bit fancier, so I'll change these. I'm Seeker, I am Survivor, and I'm Guardian. And I'll also actually grab one of these. I find they're very useful if you're ever using the mod. You can use these cards as a means of keeping track of what role you're in. So, I'm currently in neutral, but, we'll see. We start with 5 cards. Whoop. Why is my... Okay. I'm used to sitting in orange because I'm going to move because I would like to sit in orange. That's funny. It defaults me to white, but I always play in orange because, again, my girlfriend's usually hosting. So my hand is mostly red, which is the Survivor class. We also got the Improvisation, which is pretty useful. And a Sledgehammer, which is nice. Perseverance. I didn't realize I put this in the deck. I feel like maybe I shouldn't have. Oh well. It just lets me like shrug off damage. I like that because I feel like you don't have enough health a lot of the time in this as Lola. But honestly, it's cancel up to 4 of that damage. Likely you're not going to be dying from like 4 damage or horror hitting you at once. You're usually going to be dying from like 1 point hitting you. So it's probably not going to do as much as I'd like it to. I might replace this card. Anyway, I can choose as many of these cards as I want, set them aside, and replace them. We can do that once for your mulligan. And I think I need to do that. I will keep... Yeah, I'm going to discard these 3. This one lets me sort of shake around my assets. And this one... That sounded wrong. And this one lets me investigate, but it's based on the number of fortuitous discoveries in my discard pile. Which I might have some, because I discard 10 cards at the beginning of the session, but we'll do it anyway. What else do we have? We have a Sled Dog, which is a new asset, an ally asset from Edge of the Earth. They work better as a team, and they can take up 1 slot. You have a series of slots here. You can't have more than one thing in the same slot. You have 2 arcane slots and 2 hand slots, but most things you only have 1 of. You can get more, but Sled Dog, you may include up to 4 copies. Up to 2 can take up a single ally slot. So that's useful. We can also use Calling in Favors to get extra allies. If I want to say I could play a Sled Dog, I could bounce it back to my hand with Calling in Favors, getting a second Sled Dog, hopefully, and then play both of them. We'll see if that works. It might. Anyway, we also have Winging It, which cares about my discard pile. So let us shuffle these into my deck, the ones that I chose not to use. And then our start of sessions will go short supply. When your first turn of the game begins, discard the top 10 cards of your deck. Let's first say I would like to be in Survivor. There it is. Got it in 1. And I'll flip that token over if I use my once per round ability. That's what I like to do. So technically, this game goes in a series of phases. It starts at Mythos, and it goes to Investigation. Yeah, sure, why not? I've never really used this token, but why not? Investigation phase, anyone can go first, as long as everyone only takes 1 turn. And then you move to the next thing. Obviously, I'm playing solo, so it's just going to be me. All right. What do I want to do first? So you have 3 actions per turn, which I'm representing by these tokens here. At the beginning of the game, you tend to just kind of get your assets in play, like this big old sledgehammer. That's fun. I'm really curious about doing something like Sled Dog, Calling in Favors other Sled Dog. That would be interesting. Although what I should do, again, is discard 10 cards. I kind of forgot to do that. So let's just discard the top 10 cards of the deck. Glimmer of Hope. Hey, it can only be played from the discard pile. Useful. Chance Encounter. Not useful to be in my discard pile. It lets me pull things out of my discard pile. Impromptu Brawler, or Barrier. You may play this from your discard pile. Great. Scrounging for Supplies. Lets me pull things out of my discard pile. Not so great. Magnifying Glass. Not so great. But hey, I can pull things out of my discard pile, hopefully. 1-2 Punch. Another Glimmer of Hope. Very nice. A leg injury. Okay, what happens if I discard a leg injury? I don't actually know. Is it just gone? When the first turn of the game begins, discard the top cards. Usually cards like this, if they hit weaknesses, will say shuffle them back into your deck or something. Wow. Did I just dodge a leg injury? Huh. This is Jeremiah and Kirby. And this is Occult Invocation. Great. So we have 10 cards here. That gives us an idea about what is not in our deck and we cannot find right now. For example, I cannot find Jeremiah Kirby, even though that would be quite useful with Calling in Favors. I think I will start... So Sled Dogs aren't useful until you get 2 of them in play. And I do have other allies in this deck, so maybe I don't really want to play them yet. Let's take a look at what we have. I'm here. I could try and find that. Right now, I don't have a very good chance of actually succeeding at investigating, which is kind of a problem. Let's do a little bit of exploring. I think I'm just gonna do a little exploring. Get my bearings. I should say anybody watching, I might lose. I like to throw a deck together. It doesn't mean it's gonna be good. Backstage doorway, private. A simple wooden door leads into the back of the theater, far from the prying eyes of patrons. Let's go take a look. I'm going to move here. Trap room. After you reveal the trap room, search the encounter deck and discard pile for a copy of Swarm of Rats. Oh, I should have put the weapon into play. Oops. And put it into play engaged with you. 2 copies instead of if there are 3 or 4 investigators in the game. Shuffle the encounter deck if it is searched. Well, that's not good for me, actually. That's bad. Let's talk about... Here we are. Whoop. Let's talk about enemies. This is a swarm of rats. If they're engaged with you, you can't do anything but fight them or evade them. If you try to move, they will bite you. This has Hunter, which means it will follow you around on the enemy turn. There's an enemy phase after the investigator phase. We'll get to that when that happens. They only have 1 health, and they only have 1 DC, right? The fist at the top there means you have to get at least 1 success when punching this rat into submission. Sorry, rats. And if you do, you get 1 damage on them, but the middle number says how much health they have. They only have 1 health. Great. If you instead try to evade them, it's the DC becomes 3, much more difficult. So this probably isn't so bad for me. Let's actually just take a swing at it. The thing is, if I wanted to put, say, my sledgehammer into play, I kind of couldn't because they'd bite me. So we're just going to take a swing at it right now. If I fail to hit them, that's fine. Now, I should actually separate out my discard pile into cards I can use. This is a card I can use. This is a card I can use. And this is a card I can use. So I'm going to leave these. These are technically in my discard pile, but I'm going to set them aside just so I can sort of see what's going on. Glimmer of Hope allows me to, if I play it from my discard pile, which is just say I'm playing this card, it costs me 1 resource. That's what these are. They're your money. Or other intangibles. And playing it adds them to your hand. That's all it does. Why is that useful? Because the symbol underneath the cost there in the corner is a question mark. And any card, this is one of the benefits of the system, is that you don't actually have to play all the cards in your hand. You might instead simply commit the card, which is to add its symbols to your test in whatever stat they represent. You have 4 stats. Your cameo, your book, your fist, and your foot. Those are not the official names, but that's what I'm going to call them. Then there's impromptu barrier, which lets me evade something. We're not going to be doing that. We're just going to do some punching. So I'm just going to double check that this bag is shuffled. Shake it around. And we're going to see what happens. We click this button, and this will be our second action. It will be to punch. It's a -1. My fist is 3. That's 2. That beats the rat. Hit discard. It automatically sends it to this discard pile. Great. So it does waste a little bit of our time because we had to move and then do that. And we still don't have a great way of getting these tokens. I can get them with winging it, which isn't a bad idea. Maybe I should do that. What's nice about winging it is you can play it from your discard pile. So if I play this from my hand, it'll go to my discard pile, and then I can play from my discard pile. Wow! Synergy. That's not synergy. That's just the way the card works. Anyway, I might want to do this. Gives it -1 Shroud, which is effectively the same as increasing mine by 1. But I only have 3 in book. And the DC, if I reduced it by 1, would be 2. And that's a difference of only 1. And if you recall, over here, where it said, put these symbols in your deck, that is a lot of things that are bigger than 2. Well, actually, kind of no, now that I look at it. 1, 0, 0, -1, -1, -1. Those are actually fine. And then these skulls are all also only -1s. So I have a decent chance. You know, let's do it. Why not? Why not do the thing? I'm going to spend a resource, right-clicking on that, and I'm going to play Winging It. Winging It reads, investigate. Your location gets -1 Shroud for this investigation. If you played it from your discard pile, shuffle it into your deck. It's actually discover an additional clue. But I don't actually want to discover an additional clue because there's only 1 clue here. So, what a perfect time to do so. That's the -4. So, I fail. There's no actual consequence for failure unless a card says otherwise. But this goes to my discard pile, which I can say, hey, I can play it from a discard pile later. Not the worst thing that could possibly happen. I'm off to a slow start, but I'm playing solo. I bet that's kind of just how these go. I've never played solo before. I'm not really sure. So, we move to upkeep. And my upkeep is weird because I'm choosing forced learning. So, normally you would draw a card, and then you would, that's it. You'd gain a resource. You'd ready all of your cards that were exhausted. That's like tapping them in Magic. But instead I'm going to draw 2 cards and then discard 1 of them. So I'm going to hit upkeep, and then I'm going to draw an additional card. There we go. I get to choose one of these two to discard, and ooh, I really want that second sled dog. I know how useful improvisation is, but I'd really like that sled dog. So I think I am actually going to ditch my improv. This is probably a bad idea, but that's okay. That's fine. All right, so we're going to move on to... Look at these cool sled dogs. Anyway, I don't really have the resources to actually play them, but let's ignore that for now. We increase this marker by 1. We're now at 1 out of 6 Doom, and then we draw a card from here. In this mod, we'll just click this button. Dissonant Voices. Put this into play in your threat area. You cannot play assets or events, which is most cards, honestly. The only other... Basically, that's all cards. All cards are basically assets or events. The ones that aren't are the things that you, like, commit. They're skills, but that's not relevant because you don't play skills. You commit them, which is a different thing technically. Don't really worry about it. Other than that, nothing else happens, which is not so bad. That's not, like, a terrible, terrible thing. It just means I can't really do as much as I would like, but that's okay. Instead, I think I'm just going to keep trying to do this. Well, at a -1, I can't succeed. I'll just keep exploring, I guess. So this does not connect to each other, so I'm going to go in here, and then I'm going to come back out. We're going to take a look at the backstage doorway. That was 2 actions. Rehearsal room. Forced. After you succeed by 2 or more while investigating the rehearsal room, take 1 horror. They say this because the shroud is only 1, which means likely... If you are someone who could beat a shroud of 3, you actually will be succeeding by 2 or more. Likely, I will have a hard time succeeding by 2 or more. So this is perfect for me. I'll use my 3rd action to pick up that clue. A skull is a -1. A -1 brings my 3 to a 2, which is succeeding by 1, so I do not take that horror. But I do take this clue. We throw these clues down here on this little spot here. The script automatically counts them for us. It's beautiful. And we move to the end of the turn. Dissonant Voices says, at the end of the round, discard Dissonant Voices. Technically, that happens after your upkeep, so just in case, we're going to do that. I'm going to upkeep, and I'm going to draw an extra card. So here's something interesting. Fortuitous Discovery says, myriad... blah, 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 blah. X is the number of other copies of Fortuitous Discovery in your discard pile. So I can't play this one from my discard pile, but it's still useful to have in my discard pile. Right now, if I just played this right as is, it would say 0 cost, investigate and getting +0. If you succeed, discover 0 additional clues. So it is absolutely useless to me until there's at least 1 copy in my discard pile. So let us do that. Beautiful. I didn't have to really choose between 2 options that I wanted to draw because I don't want to draw this. This is the intent of combining these 2. The reason why Lola is really interesting for this is that I don't think that a investigator that really combines Survivor and Seeker, those are the orange cards, is very common. I think there's at least 1, but I didn't look into building around her. I just like Lola. So we have 6 resources, and we've got 2 dogs in our hand. Oh, I think I might do that. But first, we need to see what happens in the mythos. So discard this from play. It does just discard, right? Yeah, it just lasts for 1 round. Increase this to 2, and let's see what we have in store. The Fanatic. 2 health, 3 difficulty, spawn at the revealed location with the most clues. That's convenient. It doesn't spawn on me. If a card doesn't tell you where it spawns, the creature will spawn on your location. And if someone walks into the area that you're hanging out and it's like, hey, what are you doing here? Right? Like, and then they fight you. And if they're fighting you, you can't play cards. I mean, you could, but they'd punch you while you're playing the cards. And I don't have any good way of punching this guy yet, so this is convenient. I will actually be able to equip something before I punch them. After this enters play, move a clue from the Fanatic's location to the Fanatic, and when you defeat Fanatic, take control of the clues. That's actually super useful to me. Now, if there's any a time when there's an equivalent between 2 locations, You get to decide. I believe. That's what I've been told. So here I could do, which is useful. It's a Shroud of 3. This one is also Shroud of 3. Either one of these is useful, but you might notice at the bottom it says Victory 1. It means if I clear the clues out of that spot, I get a bonus experience point at the end of the game, so sweet. I will put them here. Great. Since we know there's a friend over there, the question is, do I want to pick up this Sledgehammer? Sledgehammer says you get +2 fists, and you deal +2 damage, but you have to spend 2 actions to do that. If you only spend 1 action to do it, you get -1. You still get +1 damage, though. It's the difference between really putting your back into that attack or cumbersomely hitting somebody with a sledgehammer. I like the flavor on this card. I think this card's fun. But if we look instead at our dogs say, exhaust X sled dogs. If I play both of them, then that could be 2. And I fight with +2. And instead of standard damage, the attack deals 2 damage. Now, 2 damage is smaller than 3 damage, but our Fanatic only has 2 health. So it's just as good. So I think I'm more interested in getting my dogs in play, so let's start with the dogs. I think that's fun. So we're just going to say I play 1 dog, I play a second dog. I'm just going to slap that in there. It doesn't really fit. Don't worry about it. That'll put me at 0 resources. I suppose this one putting me down to 3, so maybe that was a bad idea. And then I'll use my last action to move. That's my whole turn. This game is really interesting when you are just playing on your own. Turns are fast. Wow. Great. So we will move to upkeep. I will draw an additional card. Now we can choose. I can either get another improvised barrier in my discard pile, which sounds great to me. I'd love for that to be in my discard pile. Or Active Desperation. As an additional cost to play Active Desperation, choose and discard an item asset that takes up at least 1 hand slot. So I could use, say, a Sledgehammer, for example. You get +X and deal +1 damage for this attack, where X is the chosen asset's printed resource cost, such as 3. Wow, that hits pretty hard. If you succeed and the asset was in play, you gain resources equal to its cost. So that's pretty useful, potentially. It's interesting because you're using a lot of cards. So far, I don't think it's going to be too big a deal. Not that I want to discard some stuff right now. If I get a weapon that I can play from discard that's a weapon, that would be cool. I wonder if those exist. Maybe. Either way, I might be able to pull something back out of the graveyard. Not the graveyard. The discard pile. This is not Magic. Anyway, that's my turn. We're going to move to Doom. Doom ticks up to 3, and I will draw a card. You might notice, hey, this guy's still here. What's up with that? They don't have the Hunter keyword, so they're not going to move. They just attack anyone who they're engaged with, but they're not engaged with anyone because that person spawned not near me. This one, however, is going to spawn on me, I believe. Yes, because technically this location doesn't have a clue on it. This moved on to the Fanatic, and I just forgot to do it. So this one is going to spawn here, 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 and take this clue. So technically, as soon as they spawn on me, they go, hey, you're a person. And they're going to glom onto me. But that's okay. We've got a dog. So let's try it out. I have never used the sled dogs yet. I'm excited. Let's go. We're going to start by doing that exact thing. We're going to say, as an action, that's what the big bold arrow is, exhaust X sled dogs. We're not going to move X times. We're instead going to fight with a +X to our fist. So these get both exhausted, which means I can't do this again against the other Fanatic, unfortunately, but that's okay. And this is going to allow me to get +2 to my fight, putting me at a fight of 5. Not the greatest fight, but reasonable for this first introductory mission. Very good. I hit them, they do 2 damage because there was 2 dogs, and I get that clue. Fanatic gets discarded, and that's only one of my actions. I still have 2 more actions, but I don't really want to go fight this guy right now. So maybe I'll put some stuff into play. You might notice my resources here. I haven't really been talking about it. You get 1 resource every turn during upkeep. This is when I'm drawing cards. I could also take an action just to gain resources or to just draw cards. What I might actually do is use Calling in Favors, weirdly enough. Is that a bad idea? It takes an action to actually play the dog, so probably that's a waste of my time. I could also switch roles to Prepared for the Worst. I think I'll do that. So as a quick action, I am going to switch my role. I'm going to switch it to Guardian. I'm going to flip that over to say that I did that. And then I'm going to spend 1 resource to play Prepared for the Worst. It is an event which reads, search the top 9 cards of your deck for a weapon, add it to your hand, shuffle your deck. Now, a lot of times I can't do, if a card wants me to activate an ability on another card, it can be awkward for Lola, because if those are cross-type, it could be an issue. In this situation, I'm just drawing the card, so it shouldn't be an issue. So it's top 9 cards. We're just going to search and say that's 4, that's 4, that's 1. So all of these are options, and only 2 of them are weapons. This improvised weapon, not a weapon. We're going to take the boxing gloves. Boxing gloves are a weird thing to use a lot of the time. For most people would say, don't use boxing gloves, those are bad. But boxing gloves give you a passive +1 while fighting. And that's cool. It's useful because if I am in a role other than Guardian, I still get that +1. That said, I still might rather to use my Sledgehammer because it doesn't give me plus damage. It just gives me plus skill. So, That is my whole turn, I think. No, it's not. That was my second action, wasn't it? As my third action, I'll wish I had more money, I guess. Yeah, I'll wish I had more money. That's what I'll do. So I'll do that. I'll gain 1 resource. Great. No, actually, I'll draw a card. Cards are almost always better than resources. I don't know if let me just check. I might not have shuffled my deck. I did, in fact, shuffle my deck. I'm going to shuffle this again, but this card still stands. Okay, cool. I think that's a perfectly reasonable way of satisfying that. This was equally random now as it was before. This card is, yes. Okay, improvised weapon. Cool. This is a fun one. I like this. Again, it's the same thing as before. The attacked enemy gets a minus to their value instead of increasing yours, which I think is cute. It also has some gameplay relevance, but usually it's just cute. It doesn't do extra damage, though, unless I do it from my discard pile. So I'm hoping to get rid of this card, but that's okay. Let's move to the monster phase. Rawr, I'm scary. And then we'll upkeep. And I will draw another card and choose between these 2. Now this time, interestingly, Fortuna Discoveries actually has use now. Throwing in your discard pile is super relevant for the first one because X is 0. But this time, X will be 1. So do I want to spend 1 resource to get +1 to my investigation and discover 1 additional clues? Yeah, I would like to do that. On the other hand, Scrounge for Supplies lets me choose any level 0 card in my discard pile and add it to my hand. Which, I mean, it's sort of like spending my action to draw a card, except for I get to choose it out of any of these cards, including these 10, which are pretty good. This one lets me fight well. This one lets me put this ally into play, which I can't really use right now because I'm using my sled dogs. This one lets me fight well. This one lets me find other things. Don't scrounge for supplies for scrounge for supplies. That's a bad idea. This one is a pretty decent idea. It lets me look at things with my magnifying glass. And I am having trouble investigating. Investigating is sort of the primary thing you're going to do until the threats start to build up. There's also Chance Encounter, which is really cute. It lets you put an asset into play, an ally into play, for 1 turn only and then throw it back again. This is more useful as when it levels up, but I'm planning ahead by taking it. Again, also not useful right now because I have my ally slot full of dogs. And then there's prepared for the worst. There's also improvisation, which I don't know if counts as level 0. You can see that the like spot under the cost is that little like white bar, but on something else it has no experience dots. So I think they don't count, but I could be wrong. I'm not entirely sure. Magnifying glass is like a pretty decent idea though. Either way, spending an action to do that feels not like what I want to do right now, so I think I will discard this one. Great. We move on, we increase our Doom. Doom is now at 4 out of 6, so it's getting pretty high. Another Fanatic shows up. Now this time, no location has any clues. Again, to remind you, revealed location with the most clues. So these ones have clues, but I haven't gone there yet, so I can't find them there, if that makes sense. I imagine this is sort of like hearing somebody in the other room. When enters play, you move a clue from its location to itself. This is actually really useful for getting a clue if you're better at killing people or beating people up or whatever you want to call it than actually doing the thing. In this case, they're just going to hang out. I would say that this room has equivalent clues to either of these other two rooms, so they're just going to stay there and I'm just never going to go back. Simple as that. Easy. Let us continue. It's my turn. Now, I could just move and fight this person using my dogs, which is pretty good. That seems pretty good. I like that. That seems great. Yeah, I'm just going to do that. So, I'm going to move as my first action. This guy immediately gloms onto me, says, "Rawr, I'm a fanatic," and I say, "Doggos!" And the dogs are going to fight. Again, this gives me plus X to my fight, so I'm fighting at 5, and the DC is 3. -3, I fail. That's bad, actually. But that's okay. We can deal with this. So I moved and I attacked. I still have one action left to salvage the situation. And I have an improvised weapon. Improvised weapon actually isn't very useful right here, unfortunately, because this guy's got 2 health. And as long as they have any health at the end of this, they're going to punch me. Now, I could just take the damage. It's not the worst thing. In fact, my dogs can each soak 4 damage before they go down. So I might just do that. That might just be fine, honestly. But I also could pull something out of here, like an impromptu barrier. Lets me evade them, and then they won't be able to do something for a turn. But I think I will use the improvised weapon. So we're going to spend 1 resource. We're going to play the improvised weapon. This lets me fight. I'm only fighting 3 to 2 right now. So odds aren't great that I'll succeed, but they're okay. That's a success. And this goes to my discard pile, which is fine because I can play it from my discard pile. That's the main reason I did that. This will go over here. Haha. And we should move to the next step. The next step, of course, is that this guy wants to fight me. This guy wants to fight me. So they will. We can see that they have the one little heart in the bottom next to the name enemy. The word enemy, not the name. On the other side, there would be a brain if it did horror, but it only does physical. This guy only knows how to punch. So they punch me. Ow! I won't actually take that. I may get the dog to soak a hit. I know that sounds bad. But they're sturdy dogs. It'll be fine. And we will move on to upkeep. I upkeep. These guys ready. Good dogs. And I get to draw an additional card. And here we are. Ooh, interesting. So this is a card I really like. It's called Moonstone. It says you cannot play or commit Moonstone from your hand. After you discard Moonstone from your hand, play it, paying its cost. Unfortunately, its cost is 3, and I currently only have 1 resource. Otherwise, I would have this card, discard the Moonstone. It doesn't say look at 2 cards, put 1 in your discard pile, 1 in your hand. It says draw 2, then discard 1 of them. So, I assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, Internet, that this counts. It enters my hand before I discard it. Unfortunately, I can't really do much with this. I can't actually pay it right now. Now, you might be like, well, that's a dead card in your hand. Wouldn't you rather actually, like, just discard it? And the answer is probably yes. There's another way I can discard the card, which is hand size. So if I look at my hand, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 cards in my hand right now. If I end my turn with 9 cards in my hand, I'll discard one of them. So I could possibly discard Moonstone to hand size. And if I'm playing a lot of cards from over here, that seems actually pretty likely. You might also go, can't you play Glimmer of Hope from your discard pile? And I can. But all that does is put it back into my hand so that I can commit it. So there's no real reason to do that necessarily. I could just commit it to something. Again, committing it, increasing my test by question mark, which is wild. I think probably I'm just going to discard the Moonstone. And we'll see it some other day. The Moonstone is not even doing a ton for me right now. If you actually looked at what it does, it gives you +1 mind and +1 foot, which are useful, but I'm mostly using book and punch right now. So not a big deal. Not a big deal. That was my upkeep. Let's move on to Doom. Goes up to 5, and what do we draw? Rotting Remains. Test 3 mind. For each point you fail by, take a horror. So here is a reason why it would be useful to have something like a Moonstone. I currently have 3 as my mind. The DC is 3, so I would have to get a 0 or better. I think we're going to actually use that Glimmer of Hope now. Now, because I'm committing it, I don't have to pay the cost. That's only to actually play the card. So I'm just going to say I discard this. That's what committing is. And I will get a floating +1. So I'm technically using a 4 against 3 instead of 3 against 3. So I need to get a -1 or better to win. But this one also has scaling downside. It's for each point you fail by, take a horror. And therefore, even if I don't succeed, it was still worth doing. -3 is pretty brutal. So instead of failing by 3 and taking 3 horror, I'm going to fail by 2. Take 2 horror. We're going to put those on our dogs as well. The dog has seen some stuff. Remember, each of these dogs has 2 and 2, so they're pretty hardy. I only have 6 and 6. I'm pretty weak. So, that's a shame, but it's fine. Great. Because we were 4 -3 is 1. DC was, yeah, that's 2. I'm right. I know what I'm talking about. It doesn't say direct, does it? Sometimes a card will say direct horror or direct damage, in which case you can't slough it off onto gear if you have like a coat or something, or a dog, for example. I'm sorry that I'm talking about dogs being hurt so much. I feel awful. What's cool is I can actually bounce them back to my hand with calling and favors, and then they'll be like healed because they're a card in a card game. I think that's kind of fun. Anyway, this guy needs to get punched, and right now my ability isn't super great to do so. I could use the dogs, but it doesn't really help. I guess I could use one dog. Let's use one dog. Why not use both of them? Yeah, the other dog's not really useful on its own. Yeah, we're going to use both dogs. It's going to overkill, but that's fine. Dog time. This is my first action. -1. Great. That knocks this guy out. I get this clue. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that our agenda advances immediately. If you have 3 clues per investigator, which is 3 clues, this just happens. I believe it happens immediately. I could be wrong. I don't really know. Click this button to remove all clues from all investigators. Boop. Let's see what happens. A shadow creeps along the wall beside you, and your heart leaps into your throat. You turn, and a figure flits away just out of sight. Either your mind is playing tricks on you, or someone else is in the theater. You follow the direction of the shadow, surrounding a nearby corner. At the far end of the hall, he stands, awaiting you. A man in an elegant black suit, his face covered by a pale mask. Though his attire has changed, you instantly recognize him as the actor who played the role of the stranger, one of the characters from The King in Yellow. He turns and disappears through an open doorway, as if taunting you to follow. Choose one of the set-aside locations at random. Put the location into play and spawn the set-aside, the man in the pallid mask enemy at that location, instead of his normal spawn location. Advance to one of the 3 copies of the Act 2A at random. Remove the other 2 copies of Act 2A from the game without looking at them. Great. So, I believe they're saying are they these ones? Lobby doorways? Or does it mean any of them, including backstage? Put 2 backstage doorway locations to play at random. Choose one of the set aside locations at random. I would assume that could also be a backstage location. I don't know if that's accurate. I'm going to play it only with the lobby doors just to be sure. But I don't actually know. I believe this is our pale man in the pallid mask. Yes. I don't know what this card is. I shouldn't look at that. Okay, great. I'm going to say it's one of these 3 cards. So I'm going to just do that. It's one of 3. Is that right? Or one of them? Choose one of the set aside locations at random. Technically, this is set aside and it is a location, so maybe it's allowed, but whatever. I feel like this is the best thing to do when I'm not sure. Green room. Investigate. You get +3. Was I not supposed to flip that over? I probably wasn't supposed to flip that over. Let's ignore that. I totally didn't flip that over. It is a plus sign and a it connects to anything that connects. Right. It's a lobby doorway. We don't know what's down there. Why would I guess a lobby doorway connects to the green room? Goes all the way around the stage. Yeah. I've been in a theater. So this guy hangs out here. This guy hangs out here. They spawn at location farthest from all investigators, which happens to also be true, but it's not, you know, it didn't have to be. Does this connect? And I feel like this should connect all the way around. Maybe it does when it opens. I don't know. Anyway. They're aloof, which means they will not attack you unless you've engaged them, I think. And as an action, so any card that has like text like action, do a thing, is if you are at the location of that card, that is an action that you as an investigator can take, which is interesting. Action, investigate. Your location gets +2 shroud for this investigation. If you succeed, don't discover any clues. Instead, defeat the man in the pallid mask. So instead of beating the crap out of them, I could investigate. We'll find out which one's easier for me when the time comes. Now, I want to look at Act 2A, Act 2A, Act 2A, Act 3A. So let's not look at any of those. These ones are going to be set aside. I don't know where they go. I'm going to put them over, I don't know, here. Sure. Great. Ooh, that was weird. So yes, advance this to one of the 3 copies of 2A at random. Remove the other 2 from the game. Do not look at them. So we've moved to the Stranger. The mysterious stranger from the King in Yellow might know something about what happened during the intermission. You must find and confront him if you are to discover the truth. When the man in the pallid mask would be discarded from play, advance. We still only have the 1 tick to actually do this, so that's good. I believe my first action was getting that clue by way of defeating a fanatic. So I still have 2 actions left. And doom is about to be upon us, which is a little bit scary. I would like, I think... How's this one worded? Search the top 9 cards of your deck for an ally. Play it, reducing its cost by X. X is the cost of the ally asset. Return to your hand. Shuffle your deck. Now, I know the ally assets I have. I have more dogs. And I've got this interesting one that we saw earlier that you may recall, which is this guy. They cost 4. 4 minus 3 is still 1. And after paying, calling in favors, I'll be at 0. So I think I'm going to actually increase my resources by 1, and then I'm going to play calling in favors as my last 2 actions. So we will bounce this guy to my hand. Whoop. I'm hoping to find a dog, but just in case, because I didn't want this to like completely whiff, if that's not clear what I was doing. So, yes. Choose an ally asset you control. Return it to your hand. Then, search the top 9 cards of your deck for an ally asset. So, hopefully... 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. So, we've got 2 dogs available to us. We will take a new sled dog. This guy gets to go and play. Now, interestingly, they're not actually... I'm going to actually just stick them down my body for now, just to like give them space to breathe, because this guy still has a horror on them. This goes into my discard pile. Very good. And there was no cost, because 3 minus 3 is 0. So, excellent. I got the extra resource. Didn't need it, but I'm glad I took the time to do so, just in case. We move to combat. This guy doesn't want to fight, so that's fine. We're going to upkeep. We're going to draw an additional card. And we're going to discard one of these 2 cards. We could either discard Scavenging, which is useful for getting cards out of your discard pile, so I probably don't want to do that. Or Boxing Gloves, which I already have a copy of, so I think I do want to do that. So Boxing Gloves, into the trash you go. And we are going to move right along. If we go to here, we will hit Doom 6. Doom 6 says... Abruptly, the malformed body of an unnatural nightmare slams onto the stage, its slithering tendrils reaching into the aisles. It opens its maw and lets out a shrill, piercing song. The melody is uncanny. The notes sear into your mind. Pain pounds in your forehead, and blood runs from your ears. Search all set-aside cards and the victory display for the Royal Emissary. Spawn it in the theater. That would be this friend, I believe. The theater. Must have been one hell of an intermission. Royal Emissary, messenger from Aldebaran. Aldebaran? Has 4 health, fights at 4, evades at 2, or can be fought at 4, can be evaded at 2. Its prey is lowest mind. This matters for who it chooses to hunt if you're in multiplayer. It is massive, which means I believe it is engaged with everyone at once, but doesn't follow you if you move. Don't remember how that works. If you're engaged with something and you move, you drag it with you. I don't remember if that's the case for massive. I'll have to double check that rule. That one actually I would like to double check. Forced, at the end of the enemy phase, each investigator at this creature's location or a connecting location takes a horror. So any of these locations are connected. Is this a connecting location? I don't think so. I'm not sure. I don't know. If one-way things are connecting, I don't know if that counts. Hard to say. This is a one-way area you can see. Because the balcony, well, you can jump off the balcony if you wish. You are allowed. But, yeah, I mean, this isn't too hard for me to deal with. What's interesting with this one is it's at the end of the enemy phase, each investigator takes horror. It's not if they're ready, each investigator takes horror. Because often, that's what happens, is you exhaust something like this so that you don't have to deal with its passive effect. But it's just going to happen anyway. Doesn't matter. You just, as long as you're here, boom. So, the question becomes, can I get there fast enough for that to be, like can I actually get in and do something useful? Maybe. You might recall there's a second ability on the dogs. So, all that said, this now resets to 0. And we read, the creature's song echoes relentlessly throughout the halls of the theater. The melody repeats again and again, yet somehow never the same note twice. After Royal Emissary is added to the feature display, remove all Doom from play, reset the agenda back to 1A, and then place 3 Doom on that agenda. So we go through this again. That's why the wording here says search the victory display for the Royal Emissary. Basically, if you defeat something that's worth victory points, it goes to the victory display, which means it's not in the discard pile. So if you shuffle the Mythos deck, this encounter deck, you won't see it again, which is generally very useful. You know, depending. So, I'm actually quite over time for my usual thing. I think we're going to use this as our moment to pause. Wish me luck, everybody. Can the Garbage Queen do it? Well, I guess we'll find out. I've been Darcy Bits. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'll see you next time. Have a good night.